Ewa soared effortlessly above Mount Borah, gliding like a bird on the warm summer air and feeling at her peak. Gripping the control lines, she dove for speed, dancing between thermals while awaiting the updated forecast over the radio. Black clouds gathered ahead, but Ewa was undeterred. Minutes later, she glanced around, surprised to find herself almost alone. Where had the 100-plus paragliders gone? The swiftly darkening sky provided the answer. Her glider jolted in the unstable air as the temperature dropped. Shivering in her light layers, she felt the first drops of rain. Something was wrong. These small clouds shouldn't produce such rainfall. She had missed something. Then the rain turned to stinging hail, and the winds began to batter her. Fighting the lines, Ewa tried an emergency descent, but the elements overwhelmed her. Suddenly, a violent updraft yanked her skyward. The sky darkened further, and conditions deteriorated. She climbed rapidly, 10 meters per second, 15, 20, and her variometer soon read 5,000 meters. Her glider collapsed and spun. She struggled to keep it open. Her dreamlike flight over Australia had become a nightmare. Now, she was fighting for survival. On a hot February morning in 2007, Ewa Wiśnierska stood on Mount Borah's ridge, gazing at the yellow-orange expanse below. This sparsely populated region near Manila, 6 hours inland from Sydney, was buzzing with activity. Around her were 149 of the best paragliders in the world. 16 years earlier, at age 20, Ewa had watched paragliders launch into the air, captivated by their effortless ascent. 9 years passed before she finally tried it herself during a family visit in Poland. She remembered pulling the glider overhead, taking a few running steps, and feeling an incredible lift, like she'd grown wings. Athletic and driven, Ewa found her life's passion in paragliding. Within 4 years, she rose to the top ranks, winning the German championship and numerous World Cups. The sport's allure lay in pushing boundaries and taking calculated risks. Now, at age 36, her sights were set on victory in the Australian World Championships. Past successes had fueled her high expectations. She came to Australia determined to win. This open competition tested distance and airtime and served as a warm-up for the upcoming championships. Despite news of a distant storm, thermal turbulence was expected here. It was precisely why they flew in this region. At 11:30 a.m., the launch began. Mount Borah's ridges offered excellent updrafts despite its modest 800-meter elevation. The atmosphere was serious yet friendly. Paragliding competitions might be individual, but the community of pilots was tight-knit. Watching the other competitors gave the German team valuable insight into the weather and terrain. The goal was to find thermals, climb, cover distance, then find the next thermal, repeating this cycle. Yet the team's delayed launch meant the storm warnings were intensifying. Still, the bad weather remained 20 kilometers away, not expected to hit until later. It was a gamble. Unpredictable storms could bring stronger thermals. At 12:30 p.m., with over 100 pilots already airborne, the Germans took off. After checking her GPS and variometer, Ewa felt her heart pounding. She watched her teammates race toward the ridge. Then it was her turn. A quick pull, and her parachute rose overhead. She sprinted toward the edge and leaped into the void. Airborne at last. It was a glorious flight over Manila. Multicolored canopies dotted the bright sky, with green meadows, rugged outcrops, and winding waterways below. They hopscotched from one thermal to another under warm, breezy conditions. By 3 p.m., the once clear sky turned slate gray, lowering visibility. Ewa remained calm. She trusted her skill. Meanwhile, many pilots decided to land before things worsened. Unfazed, Ewa planned to skirt around the cloud system along with about 10 other pilots. Despite being buffeted by the wind, she wanted either to push through or fly above. This was where races were won or lost. She steered left, trying to avoid being drawn under the clouds. Suddenly, her climb rate jumped to 3, then 4, then 5 meters per second, faster and faster. She knew she had to react immediately. New South Wales summers often brought sudden storms with rain, hail, and strong winds. Storm clouds were merging faster than usual, creating a colossal cumulonimbus with swirling updrafts and downdrafts. The path Ewa was aiming for vanished as the clouds fused. Icy air mixed with hot air from below, generating massive lift, swallowing her glider in seconds. Despite her skill, Ewa lost control. Real terror struck when it started to rain and then hail, a sign these clouds were far more dangerous than they seemed. Though cloud suck is familiar to paragliders, this was beyond ordinary experience. Giant hailstones pummeled her face. She fought to stay calm, initiating an emergency spiral, a last resort maneuver that can drop a paraglider at 20 meters per second. The G-forces were immense. She spiraled desperately, yet the updraft overwhelmed her descent. After a few minutes, she gave up. The spinning was futile. Attempting to escape sideways, she was immediately sucked into total darkness. Within the raging storm, Ewa climbed at over 30 meters per second. Lightning flashes blinded and thunder deafened her. Drenched and freezing in her thin clothing, she tried to maintain control, but the hail battered her relentlessly. She shivered violently, yet clung to the slim hope that she'd be thrown out of the cloud. She refused to give up, thinking of her parents as she prayed for help. Her variometer showed she was still ascending, the temperature plummeting with every meter gained. She had to keep the glider open. A collapse meant a fatal drop. Then a faint, crackled voice came over her radio. It was her ground crew. She could only say she was blind in the cloud and powerless to change course. Her last transmission reported an altitude near 5,500 meters. Soon after passing 7,000 meters, a tremendous force pressed her back in the harness, and everything went black. She lost consciousness. Her limp body slid in the seat as she soared still higher, 7,000, then 8,000 meters, into temperatures of minus 40 degrees Celsius. She was well into the death zone. On the ground, the German team desperately searched the vast countryside. With no further radio contact, they feared the worst. Minutes turned to hours. The storm loomed overhead, and they wondered if she could still be up there. Meanwhile, Ewa's paraglider miraculously maintained flight. At 9,000 meters, higher than Mount Everest, she soared at jumbo jet altitude, where humans need oxygen masks. Hypoxia set in, shutting down her body. She unknowingly climbed to about 10,000 meters. No paraglider had survived such heights. Finally, her ice-encrusted canopy stalled, and she plunged at over 200 kilometers per hour. After free-falling 3,000 meters, her parachute reopened, jerking her into consciousness. Icicles clung to everything. She trembled uncontrollably, disoriented, with no idea how much time had passed. Checking her watch, she saw she'd been unconscious for 45 minutes. She was still inside the cloud. Logic said she should be dead, but she resolved to descend. Carefully, she spiraled again, avoiding intense updrafts that might suck her back in. After another 45 minutes, the cloud thinned. She glimpsed fields and trees below, a farm dotted with cattle. Utterly numb, she lined up her landing approach. On final descent, she pulled the brakes and touched down gently. Only then did the enormity of her survival sink in. Weak and shivering, she tried standing but collapsed, curling up on her harness for warmth. Her phone rang, her radio was broken, but the call kept dropping. With great effort, she sent her GPS coordinates. Her team raced 60 kilometers to reach her. They found her alive, stunned by the sight of her frozen canopy. Doctors deemed it a medical miracle, treating her frostbite and marveling that hypoxia-induced unconsciousness may have protected her body. The data from her GPS showed she'd exceeded 10,000 meters in altitude. Tragically, another pilot, He Zhongping from China, caught in the same storm, did not survive. Amazingly, she returned to Mount Borah a week later. Though she knew she wouldn't win the World Championships, she refused to let fear rule her life. The media watched as she launched again. It felt like her very first flight all over. While physically unscathed, Ewa carried the memory of her lost colleague. She vowed never again to take hazardous risks just to compete. It was difficult for someone so ambitious, but she knew self-preservation had to come first. Thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate your time and hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked what you saw, be sure to check out the other great content on our channel. Your support means the world to us, and we can't wait to bring you more. Thank you again, and see you in the next video.